Member for Grey, Rowan Ramsey, welcome back to Flow on 2022.
No, thanks, Ricky. Good to be with you. Let's hope 2022 is we can be a little bit more optimistic than we have been about 2021. So,
well, certainly on the COVID front and lockdowns and the like, we would hope so. But for you on the political front, the polls, if you put any stock in them, aren't showing things are too flash for the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party. Are you talking up an underdog status yet?
Well, that may be the case. I would say that I think like this government has just about had the kitchen sink thrown at it, quite frankly. On every the last 2 years with COVID, we've been challenged on a virtually daily basis. And if you look around the world, I reckon it probably performed pretty well. In fact, better than that. But when people look at their own personal life and they say, well, I still can't do this, I still can't do that, and I'm not as well off as I was 2 years ago pre-COVID, they sort of roll it all up into one and go, well, maybe it's the government's fault and things would have been better if they'd done this, that and everything else. And I get a lot of people sort of complaining, writing, contacting the office and saying, why didn't you, for instance, have these rat tests ready to go and all spread around Australia? Well, the thing is with this virus is it's changing on a virtually daily or weekly basis, and nobody anticipated back in November that we would be dealing with the Omicron virus in January and February, and the impact, the infectious nature of it, and the impact it's having on the whole world, so we respond to the situation as it evolves. So it was John Maynard Keynes who said that when the facts change, sir, I change my mind. What do you do? And so the government is being challenged like that every day. And I think there's the astonishing performance of the economy. In fact, we've got 4.6% unemployment. There were people, Treasury was predicting we're going to hit 12% at the beginning of this, and that's been ameliorated because of actions that the government, Josh Frydenberg, Scotty have made. And as we have approached the election, well, people can be unhappy on any given day, but I think if they have a fair look at the government's performance, I don't think they'll be able to pinpoint what on earth it is they should have done on any separate day, given the information of the day.
Well, it's been reported Treasurer Frydenberg's indicated maybe on this on the grounds of isolation needed if you've been exposed or a close contact, bringing that into 5 days. Are you hearing on the Labor front that there's a labour shortage in your electorate, and is that sort of regulation around COVID contributing to that labour shortage?
Well, we're having a chronic labour shortage, full stop. It was tight enough to get labour before the virus, and it's been getting increasingly hard through, and certainly the last 2 months. But we've got all kinds of shortages across Grey. If you look back to only November, when we had virtually no infections in South Australia, and yet we were already struggling for labour on so many fronts. Part of this is caused by government, I think you could say, because we are spending so much on the economy, on infrastructure, that it's got so much of the economy really buzzing along, and construction gangs are looking for workers, and there's the spin-offs that go with that. But of course, the recent event of Omicron, which has led to absenteeism from the workplace from people becoming infected, and those infection rates, while they seem to have plateaued in South Australia, I actually think they're on the rise in the regions. It's just sort of reached us in a way. So likely to probably regionally get a little worse over the next few weeks, but we hope that we've hit the ceiling statewide, and there seems to be some confidence in the health circles now that we're near the peak, and that infections are going to start dropping off. And I heard the Premier only 20 minutes ago on the radio talking about the number of people in the health sector that are back at work this week as compared to last week, and that things are on the improve in that area. So that's a positive sign.
Well, you mentioned shortages. We'll talk about that right now, but I'll come to projects in a minute. Water shortages when it comes to the Eyre Peninsula. The candidate for the seat of Flinders, Sam Telfer, your Liberal stablemate, has indicated that he will support a desalination plant going somewhere that, in effect, everyone's happy with. What's your position on desalination on the peninsula?
Well, that is on board at the moment. I had a meeting with them in Port Lake a few weeks ago, and they've gone back to the drawing board. Obviously, the proposal at the BHP wharf, the old BHP wharf, has met with some resistance, particularly from the fishing industry and particularly from the mussel industry. And I don't know there's any science to say, well, it's going to cause problems, but on the other hand, I don't think the science is clear enough to say it's not going to cause problems. So they've gone back and they are reassessing that site, doing some more work on it, but also looking at a further 3 or 4 sites to see if they can come up with something different over the next 12 months. That will get the tick of public approval. Now, I think we've got to let that process take its way. I mean, there's not much point announcing a review and then have other people go running around and saying, well, I know the results of the review before it started, this is what we should do. So I think there's been obviously some unhappy people locally. SA Water, the government, South Australia government heard that and they've gone back to the drawing board on that. So I expect that situation to resolve itself over the next 12 months.
So what role can the federal government play on that one? I know some moons ago that Kevin Rudd had a chat with Mike Rann, it might have been, or maybe Jay Weatherall, and said, we'll help you build a desalination plant in Adelaide. Can the federal government come to the party helping to make this become a reality?
Well, supply of water is a state issue. It's not generally seen as a federal issue, and that's not to say I can't remember. I don't think the federal government put any money into that into the large desalination.
I thought
plant
they paid for half. I think they paid for half of it.
Oh well, I'm on the back foot on that one. I don't know that I can tell you, Ricky. But in this particular case, like this is not a very big desalination plant. It might sound big on Eyre Peninsula, but we're talking something that is, I think, 4 gigalitres a year, with the ability to double that to 8. The one in Adelaide is 100. To give you some idea, the one that BHP was going to build on the Port Lowley Peninsula at one stage was 100 gigalitres a year. So this is a relatively small plant, and SA Water is a profit-making arm of the state government. Now, that's not to say that if they put a request, a proposal to the federal government, that it would not be listened to, but at this stage I'm not aware that they are seeking assistance. It has been, they've said to me, well, what happens if it's going to cost a lot more because we've got to go somewhere else? Well, there's a lot of ifs and becauses and maybes in there, and I think we'll address that issue when we get to it. One can be sure that if infrastructure is needed in grey and there's a role for federal government, there'll be a good loud voice in Rowan Ramsey, but let's wait and see how that one evolves, I think.
Well, and the Labor Party nationally are talking about being involved in rebuilding the nation, their reconstruction fund and the like. Is there a place for helping the Leigh Creek urea project get their approvals over the line? Massive shortage of urea across the farming sector, and the federal government stepped in to help Incitec Pivot keep producing urea as they were about to close. Could the feds help out this project up at Leigh Creek?
The approval process is a state approval process, and I understand they've pretty much ticked the boxes now. And then there's, of course, the next phase is the investment phase. Now, I don't particularly know where that's up to. I'm not aware that Leigh Creek Energy was seeking federal support at this stage. They certainly haven't spoken to me about that.
You've been in touch with them?
Not for some time. No. As I said, the approval process doesn't need any particular tick-off from the federal government. All of these mining projects, in the end of the day, like the state owns the land, if you like, owns the property on which the drilling takes place. So most of the approvals, apart from a couple of environmental tick boxes, come from state governments. And of course, they are the recipient of royalties and all those things that go with that particular industry. In the case of Incitec Pivot, we were facing pretty much an emergency situation, and we were very keen to make sure that we shored up our urea supply in the short term, and in particular the tech grade for the AdBlue. So there was a problem there. We stepped in to ameliorate that problem. My understanding is, while you wouldn't say it's completely under control, we certainly stepped in the right direction, and it seems to have taken some of the heat out of the market. One of the things, of course, that was causing the problem was that you were seeing panic buying, and so AdBlue was becoming the new toilet paper, and all of that is pretty unhelpful. But But it has quietened down a lot now, and I think there is a degree of confidence in the industry that there will be enough when it's required, and that the federal government has actually made those concrete moves to make it happen. So if you're talking about urea production in particular, that's why we moved in that area. For Leigh Creek, I think there's once again a bit of distance to go with the proving up of the project, but my understanding is that Dan Manholz Pelican has signed off on most of the approvals now for them to go ahead, and I expect that will happen.
Now, just to clarify the point of distinction there, so desalination and the mining project, maybe not a case being made for federal intervention there, but there were some ports being considered on the Eyre Peninsula. Didn't the federal government help with a business case with one of those, and where are we heading on ports on the peninsula?
On the port arena, we'd put $25 million on the table to assist Iron Road to deliver the Cape Hardy port. And they are still trying to, my understanding, bring together the investment required, because obviously that's not going to build the whole project. That is assistance to build the project. So there are private funders that need to be brought into line, and I believe they keep working in that area. It's an uncertain world. They were very confident they could land that finance, very confident they could get the tick from the growers about ongoing deliveries to that particular facility. I don't know particularly how that project, how they're going in that process, but the last time I spoke to them, a few months ago now, they were still quite confident they were going to get it all together. Having said that, on Eyre Peninsula, the success of T-ports, I think, has surprised a lot of people. My understanding is that they're opening up a facility at Wallaroo now, and my understanding is that they're taking somewhere up towards 600,000 tonnes on Eyre Peninsula this year that will go through Lucky Bay. And I should imagine that is a consideration for those private investors in a port like Cape Hardy. But they are decisions that they will have to make, but the $25 billion from the federal government remains on the table and available for the project.
Oh, so they haven't actually taken up the $25 million, the Cape Hardy proponents?
No, it's not the kind of grant that would be given in advance of the project. It would be the kind of grant that would be taken in steps and in retrospect. So once they've spent so much, well, a bit like building a house, if you like. I don't know if you've ever built one, Ricky.
Oh, I certainly have.
Well, there you go. Well, you get the footage down and you make a payment. Well, yep. That would be the way that federal grant would work on Cape Hardy. They do some work on site and then look for recompense back at a percentage basis. And I think that's a proper business way of handling things, and I think people would expect us to handle the taxpayers' money in that manner. And so at this stage, until there's a private investor signed on, everyone locked in and the shovels start, well, the money won't flow, but the money remains available. And which is part of the attraction of getting someone to come there and invest their own capital.
Yep. So to clarify, was that something Cape Hardy proponents came to the federal government saying they wanted that grant assistance? How was the decision making about putting that $25 million?
They did. They did make it known they were looking for assistance. So there had been an earlier similar grant put on the table for the Cape Port Spencer project, which is to the south of that, of $10 million, but there was a time frame set on that, and in the end they were unable to meet that time frame, and that money was withdrawn because, once again, they couldn't land those private investors. That one particular was a pretty tight time frame, I'd have to say, but it is what it is, and you take the opportunities when they're around. Cape Hardy were looking for assistance, and it's been made available to them, but at this stage the project hasn't progressed any more than they're still trying to put it together, my understanding. And
federal government gets involved in that level because it's to do with ports? Is that the rationale?
It is not the normal place for federal government to be in the building of ports. And in fact, finding a precedent for it isn't that common, but in this particular case it was seen as being a game changer on Eyre Peninsula. That would put a lot of downward pressure on the two market costs of Eyre Peninsula grain growers, and there'd be a wide benefit across the board. Now, whether or not that benefit still remains in the light of the success of T-ports is something for the private market to analyse, but I think things have changed a bit. It would be fair to say.
Yeah, so the Leigh Creek urea project, they're talking about potentially thousands of people moving into the town where there's not many at all at the moment. That's not a game changer for Leigh Creek?
Oh, well, of course it would be. But I've been around a long time, Ricky, and there's a lot of projects that get talked up, and so they should. Unless you're optimistic about them, I can guarantee you they won't happen. But, some of the projections are a long way in the future, and you've got to get past the initial steps first. So I'm always reluctant to over-egg the likely outcomes because I think there's a whole, particularly in the Upper Spencer Gulf area, there's been a lot of things announced in the past with a lot of fanfare that actually haven't eventuated. Now, I'm certainly not saying the Leigh Creek Energy Project won't eventuate. What I'm saying is I think you take one step at a time, and then you work on what we do after that and how we can expand it. So the talk of thousands of jobs, I think, is probably premature. But let's hope it's a success. Let's hope they can actually put the proof of concept into practice and get something operating there that is actually harvesting gas from this underground seam. And then you can talk about what you do next with that gas, and that is obviously trying to turn it into urea. So long way to go yet. I back anything. Well,
I guess
I back anything that will deliver jobs and prosperity for the people of Grey, but I don't like over egging the optimistic side of things. Let's be realistic about these things.
Yes, but to paraphrase former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, it's better to under-promise and over-deliver. I guess that's where you're coming from.
Most certainly correct.
Yeah. All right, Rowan Ramsey, you've been very generous with your time on the roadside there, chatting with us on Flow. Thank you very much for your time.
No, good to talk to you, Ricky. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.